They call me the best teacher in the city. The title sits on my shoulders sometimes like a crown, and other times like a yoke. It's a label that precedes me, a reputation that echoes in the hallways before I even arrive. Parents look at me with a kind of desperate hope, as if I hold a magic wand that can transform their struggling teenager into a scholar, their apathetic child into a passionate learner. I have the plaque, of course. A heavy, cold piece of polished walnut with brass lettering that gleams under the fluorescent lights of my classroom. City's Best Educator Award. They presented it to me at a gala at the Grand Heritage Hotel, a room full of sequins and suits, the clinking of champagne glasses a soundtrack to my professional pinnacle. The superintendent gave a speech about my unwavering dedication, my innovative methods, my profound impact on a generation of young minds. I stood there in a dress I'd bought just for the occasion, a deep blue sheath that made me feel both powerful and like an imposter, and I smiled until my cheeks ached. David held my hand under the table, his thumb stroking my knuckles, a silent message of "you deserve this." And Lily, my then 14-year-old daughter, sat beside him in a dress she'd outgrown but insisted on wearing, her posture a perfect sculpture of boredom. She clapped when everyone else did, a polite, hollow sound. She was the only person in the room not looking at me. Her gaze was fixed on the centerpiece, a sprawling arrangement of lilies and orchids, as if studying its intricate, silent biology was infinitely more interesting than her mother's moment of triumph. That's the image that is burned into my memory more than the plaque, more than the applause. My daughter, a lonely island in a sea of celebration, utterly disconnected from the woman everyone was praising. The woman who uplifts every child is losing her own. The loss wasn't a sudden catastrophe. It wasn't a single, dramatic event you can point to and say, there. That's where it all fell apart. It was an erosion. A slow, patient, insidious wearing away of the bedrock of our relationship, grain by grain, moment by missed moment. It's the silence that greets me now, every single day. I come home from school buzzing with a residual energy, a current that hums through my veins. My classroom is a vortex of sound and emotion, the frantic bell, the screech of chairs, the layered cacophony of 30 different conversations, the rustle of backpacks, the shared laughter over a silly meme, the intense, quiet focus during a test, the raw, shaky voice of a student finally finding the courage to share their poetry. It's a symphony I conduct, an ecosystem I nurture. I step over the threshold of my own house, and the silence is a physical thing. It's thick and heavy, a wool blanket smothering all that vibrant energy. It's not a peaceful quiet. It's a waiting quiet. A resentful one. Lily? I'm home. I call out, my voice too bright, too teacher ly, trying to inject some of that school day warmth into the chilly air of our home. The response is a muffled okay, from upstairs, followed by the definitive, gut-wrenching click of her bedroom door. That sound is the period at the end of the sentence of our day. A full stop. A barricade being drawn. I remember a different sound. I remember the pitter-patter of small, bare feet on the hardwood floor, a sound that used to be the most beautiful music I knew. I remember a time when I was her entire universe. When she was 4, maybe 5, she would sit on the kitchen counter, her legs swinging, not yet long enough to reach the cabinets below. I'd be grading essays, my red pen flying across the pages, and she'd watch me with this look of profound, solemn concentration, her little brow furrowed in perfect imitation of my own. "What are you doing, Mommy?" she'd ask, her voice a sweet, high-pitched melody that could untangle any knot of stress in my shoulders. "I'm helping my students," I'd say, looking up and smiling at her. "They're learning how to write better stories." She'd nod, her blonde curls bouncing. "When you're done, can you help me write a story? A story about a princess dragon?" "And we will," I'd promise, closing the grade book with a decisive thud. "We'll write the best princess dragon story this world has ever seen." And we would. We'd abandon the papers on the table and build a fortress out of couch cushions and blankets, our royal castle. We'd mix pancake batter for dinner, and she'd wear a flowery apron like a royal gown, her laughter ringing through the house, a sound so pure and joyful it felt like it could clean the very air. I was her world, and she was mine. A perfect, closed circuit of love. David would come home from work and find us in our flower-dusted kingdom, and he'd just lean against the doorframe and smile, his eyes full of a love so deep and settled it was like a second heartbeat in the room. The shift was so gradual, so subtle, that I mistook it for the natural growing pains of motherhood. It started with the missed bedtimes. A parent-teacher conference that ran over because a mother was crying, terrified about her son's falling grades and his new, sullen friends. I couldn't just cut her off. I sat there, holding a box of tissues, listening, offering reassurances, building a plan. I missed Lily's bedtime by an hour. When I got home, the house was dark and quiet. David was already in his pajamas, reading a book in the living room. "She waited for you," he said softly. "She wanted you to be the one to read Goodnight Moon." My heart sank. I tiptoed into her room. The nightlight cast a soft, orange glow over her sleeping form. Her breathing was even, but her face was streaked with the dried, salty paths of tears. On her nightstand was the book, a silent accusation. I leaned down and kissed her forehead, whispering my apology into her hair. Her eyes fluttered open for a second, glassy with sleep. "You missed the goodnight kiss," she whispered, and the accusation in her sleepy voice was sharper and more painful than any criticism I'd ever received from a school administrator. Then it was the school events. I was the director of the Harrison High School annual play for 5 years running. I lived and breathed those productions. I could coax a believable performance out of the most petrified freshman, I could build a medieval castle or a New York City street out of donated cardboard and sheer willpower, I could weave lighting and sound into an emotional tapestry that made audiences gasp. But I missed Lily's first speaking role. She was a talking tree in her second-grade production of The Enchanted Forest. She had 3 lines. She had practiced them for weeks in front of her full-length mirror, her voice rising and falling with dramatic flair. I had promised, cross my heart hope to die promised, I would be there. But that afternoon, my lead actor, a brilliant, fragile boy named Leo, had a full-blown panic attack backstage. His father had just been laid off, and the pressure of the performance was the final straw. He was hyperventilating, convinced he was going to vomit on stage. I couldn't leave him. I sat with him in a dusty storage closet, doing breathing exercises, talking him down from the ledge of his own fear. I missed the entire elementary school play. David took a video on his phone. It was shaky, and you could barely hear her lines over the rustling of the audience and the off-key piano, but I watched it on my phone in that dark closet, my heart a tight, aching fist in my chest. My little tree, my Lily, delivering her lines with a seriousness that broke my heart. When I got home, high on the adrenaline of a successful opening night and the relief that Leo had been magnificent, I swept her into a hug. "You were wonderful. My little star." I gushed. She pulled away from me, her body stiff. "You weren't there," she said. It wasn't a wail. It wasn't even angry. It was a simple, devastating statement of fact, delivered with a chilling finality that a child her age shouldn't possess. She turned and walked upstairs, leaving me standing in the foyer, the ghost of her rejection clinging to me. David saw it happening. He's a good man, a steady man. An architect who designs buildings meant to last for a century, structures with strong foundations that can withstand storms. He'd tried to talk to me, his voice calm and reasonable. "Clara, you're running yourself into the ground. You're saying yes to everything. She needs you. We need you." And I, flush with the self-importance of my mission, would get defensive. "I'm doing this for her, David. For us. This job, this reputation, it provides for this family. It pays the mortgage. It gives her the opportunities we never had. And these kids, they have no one. I'm the only stable thing in some of their lives." The words sounded righteous, even to my own ears. But they were a shield. Behind them, a small, scared voice whispered, "But what about being the stable thing in your own daughter's life? My classroom is my sanctuary, my kingdom. Room 214. It's a controlled chaos of learning and life. The walls are a living tapestry, a faded poster of Shakespeare next to a vibrant map of the world, student-painted murals of literary scenes beside timelines of revolutions. I know every scuff mark on the linoleum floor, every desk that wobbles, the precise spot where the heater clanks to life on a winter morning. I have a chair, an old, slightly lumpy armchair I salvaged from a thrift store, that I call the truth chair. It sits right next to my desk. It's where students come when they're in trouble, yes, but more often, it's where they come when they're heartbroken, confused, terrified of the future, or just desperately in need of a quiet moment. I have spent countless hours in that chair, or kneeling beside it, holding the hand of a crying child who is not my own. I keep a stash of granola bars, trail mix, and instant oatmeal in my bottom drawer because I know which kids come to school hungry, which ones are running on nothing but caffeine and anxiety. I remember every name, every story. They are etched into my soul. There was Marco, who was functionally homeless for 6 months of his junior year, sleeping on couches, his entire life crammed into a single backpack. He'd come to my room before school to use the outlet to charge his phone, his only connection to the world. I'd make him a cup of tea, and we'd just sit sometimes, not talking. He graduated valedictorian. He's in medical school now. He sends me a card every Christmas that says, "You are my safe harbor." There was Sarah, a girl so choked by social anxiety that she could barely speak above a whisper. She found her voice in my poetry unit. She wrote about her panic attacks with such startling clarity and metaphor that it took my breath away. I encouraged her to share one poem. Just one. She did, her voice trembling but audible. The class was silent, then erupted into genuine, respectful applause. She's a social worker now, helping other quiet kids find their voices. There was Jamal, who everyone had written off as a troublemaker, a lost cause. He had a sharp tongue and a defiant glare. I discovered he had a genius for debate, for seeing all sides of an argument. I gave him a copy of Malcolm X's speeches. He devoured it. He found his fire, a constructive, powerful fire. He's a lawyer now, a public defender. I pour my entire soul into that room. I am a vessel that I fill up with patience, wisdom, empathy, and unwavering belief, and I pour it out for them every single day. I am their champion. I am their confessor. I am their cheerleader. I am, for many of them, the only adult who looks them in the eye and says, without a shadow of a doubt, I see you. You are not invisible. You matter. And then the final bell rings. The energy, the purpose, drains from me on the 20-minute drive home. The transition is a violent whiplash. I go from being Clara Evans, the award-winning educator, the life changer, the one who knows all the answers, to just Mom. The woman who is met with a closed door and a simmering silence. The woman whose carefully crafted questions about her daughter's day are met with a verbal shrug. Fine. Okay. Nothing. The usual. I try. God, do I try to bridge the chasm? I plan elaborate lasagna dinners, her favorite, hoping the scent of garlic and tomatoes will lure her out of her room. I suggest movie nights, buying the popcorn she likes, the sour cream and onion kind. I buy tickets to see her favorite indie band, a group I can't stand but would gladly sit through for a glimpse of her smile. The enthusiasm I can generate for a roomful of teenagers learning about the intricacies of a sonnet is a force of nature, a tidal wave of passion. But I can't seem to summon even a drop of it to penetrate the fortress my daughter has built around herself. It's like all my words, all my love, are bullets firing at a tank. They just ricochet off, useless. The worst part is the profound, gut-wrenching hypocrisy of it all. I sit across from parents at conference nights, my hands folded on the table, my face a mask of compassionate authority. I lecture them. It's not about the quantity of hours, I say, with the smooth, unshakable confidence of an expert who has all the data, it's about the quality of the engagement. When you are with your child, be with them. Put your phones away. Make eye contact. Listen to what they are not saying. I see the nods of recognition, the flickers of guilt in their eyes. I am preaching a gospel I myself cannot live. My work phone is a leech on my attention, always buzzing, always blinking with emails from students having existential crises at 10 p.m., from parents demanding to know why their precious child got a B+, from colleagues needing advice. A crisis in the life of a 17-year-old feels so immediate, so dire, so solvable. Lily's quiet, slow-burning resentment, her gradual retreat, felt like a chronic, low-grade illness I could always treat tomorrow. There's always a tomorrow for your own child, I foolishly thought. But the tomorrows piled up into years, and the distance grew from a crack into a canyon. There's a specific memory that haunts me, a ghost that visits me in my quiet moments. It was last year, during midterms. The air at school was thick with stress and caffeine. The pressure on me was immense. The school board was visiting my classroom as the final part of my city's best teacher evaluation. My lesson plan had to be perfect, a seamless blend of rigor and inspiration. Meanwhile, Lily had a science fair project. It was on photosynthesis. She'd been working on it for weeks with a dedication that surprised me, growing bean plants under different colored lights on her windowsill. She'd chart their growth every day in a little notebook, her handwriting painstakingly neat. She was so proud of her little plants, her green babies, she called them. The night before the fair, she needed a trifold poster board to present her data and hypothesis. "No problem, sweetie," I'd said, ruffling her hair absent-mindedly as I packed my school bag for the next day. "I'll pick one up on my way home." But that afternoon, Miranda Collins stayed after class. Miranda, a girl with eyes that looked decades older than the rest of her, a girl who always wore long sleeves, even on the hottest days. She sat in the truth chair, and for 20 minutes, she didn't speak. She just cried, silent, shoulder-shaking sobs that seemed to be torn from a place of deep, old pain. And I sat with her. I didn't grade the stack of quizzes on my desk. I didn't sneak glances at the clock. I just sat in the companionable silence of her sorrow, my presence a silent anchor in her storm. By the time she was ready to talk, by the time the story of her self-harm and the bullying at home had spilled out, by the time I had called her parents and the school counselor and waited to ensure she was safe and had a plan for the evening, the office supply store was closed. I came home empty-handed. The guilt was a cold stone in my stomach as I turned the key in the lock. Lily was at the kitchen table, her bean plants lined up like proud soldiers, her data charts and printed pictures arranged neatly, waiting for the trifold board that would be their stage. Her face, which had been lit with a nervous excitement, fell into a mask of profound disappointment when she saw my hands were empty. "I forgot," I said, the words tasting like ash, like failure. "I'm so sorry, baby." A student was in crisis. "We'll get one first thing in the morning. I promise. I'll take you before school." "The fair is at 8:30, she said, her voice flat, all emotion vacuumed out of it. "You have hall duty at 7:45. I'll get Mr. Jacobs to cover it. I promise, Lily. I won't let you down." She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked at me with those ancient, tired eyes that had no business residing in the face of a 12-year-old girl. It was a look that saw right through my promises, through my titles, through my entire carefully constructed identity. It saw the failure at the core. "It's okay, Mom," she said, her voice a monotone. "Dad will take me." She carefully gathered her plants and her papers, holding them to her chest like something fragile and precious, and walked out of the kitchen. David looked at me from the sink, his expression a complex mixture of pity, frustration, and a deep, shared sadness, before he followed her. I stood alone in the kitchen, the city's best teacher, the woman who had just orchestrated a safety net for a suicidal teenager, and I had never felt like more of a catastrophic failure. I had potentially saved a girl's life, and in doing so, I had broken my daughter's heart over a $60 piece of cardboard. The math of that is impossible. There is no justifying it. There is no scale on which those two things can be balanced. The grateful tears of Miranda's mother, when I spoke to her on the phone, did nothing to dissolve the cold stone of shame in my gut. The success stories of my other students provided no solace. This was a different kind of ledger, and I was deeply, irrevocably in the red. The award ceremony for this city's best teacher plaque was a surreal, out-of-body experience. A downtown hotel ballroom, sparkling with 1,000 points of light from the chandeliers, the air smelling of perfume and expensive food. They played a video montage, testimonials from my students, past and present, their faces beaming on the giant screen, their voices overlapping in a chorus of praise. Mrs. Evans believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. She made literature feel alive, like it was written just for me. She's the reason I'm in college today. My colleagues gave speeches, calling me a mentor and a friend. David was there, handsome and proud in a suit he'd had tailored, his hand finding the small of my back, a steadying presence. And Lily was there, in a dress she'd picked out herself months ago, one that was now a little too short in the sleeves, a little too tight in the shoulders. She fidgeted with the lace at the cuff, a nervous habit. When they called my name, the applause was thunderous, a wave of sound that lifted me out of my seat. A standing ovation. I walked to the stage, my heels clicking on the polished floor, a fixed, professional smile on my face. I looked out at the sea of admiring, smiling faces, and all I could see was my daughter, sitting stiffly in her chair, her hands folded in her lap now, clapping with a slow, measured politeness. Her eyes were completely empty of any pride, any connection. She was the only person in the room not looking at me. She was studying the intricate pattern on her dinner plate, as if it held the secrets to the universe. I gave my acceptance speech. I talked about the profound privilege of teaching, the resilience of young people, the transformative power of belief. My voice was steady, my words carefully chosen. Everyone told me afterwards it was inspiring, moving, perfect. But all I could think about was the trifold board. I wondered if Miranda's plants on her windowsill were thriving. I wondered if Lily's beans had died, neglected after the science fair was over. I wondered if the slight sheen of sweat on my palms was from stage fright or from the heat of my own shame. That night, I placed the heavy plaque on the mantelpiece, right in the center. It looked alien there, next to our family photos. David hugged me, a long, warm embrace. "I'm so proud of you, Clara. You've earned this." He meant it, every word. Lily gave me a quick, perfunctory hug, her body barely making contact with mine. "Congratulations, Mom," she mumbled into my shoulder. Then she pulled away. "I have a lot of homework. I'm going to bed." And she was gone, her footsteps echoing on the stairs. I stood in the living room for a long time, staring at that shiny piece of wood with its engraved accolades, and it felt like a tombstone. A marker for the part of me that had been a good, present, attentive mother. A memorial to the woman I used to be for my daughter. The conflict became the very air we breathed. It was no longer about specific missed events, it was in the fabric of our daily existence. It was in the way she'd physically tense up if I touched her shoulder, a tiny flinch that spoke volumes. It was in the strategic timing of her requests. She'd only ever ask me for a ride, for help with a project, for permission to go to a party, when I was clearly buried under a mountain of grading or on a stressful phone call with a parent. It was a setup for failure, and I walked into the trap every time. It was in the way she'd talk animatedly to David about her friends, her teachers, her crushes, her dreams for the future, her voice lively and full of inflection, and then the moment I walked into the room, she'd fall silent, or the topic would shift to something banal, like the weather. I was an intruder in their easy, comfortable camaraderie. A ghost at the feast of my own family life. I started to resent my job. The very thing that had defined me, that had given my life meaning and purpose, began to feel like a gilded prison. The ringing of the school bell was a death knell for my relationship with my daughter. I'd look at my students, their faces so full of open admiration and love for me, and a treacherous, ugly thought would whisper from the darkest corner of my mind, "Why can't she be more like them? Why is it so easy to love them and so hard to love her? Why are they so grateful for my crumbs of attention, while my own daughter starves in front of a feast I prepared for everyone else?" And then the guilt would crash over me, a tidal wave so strong it would leave me breathless and nauseous. I'd have to lock myself in the staff bathroom and splash cold water on my face, staring at my pale, horrified reflection in the mirror. I tried to talk to her. I'd knock on her door, a timid, tentative sound. "Come in," she'd say, her voice granting me entry like a queen tolerating a visiting peasant. Her room was a foreign land, a territory I no longer understood. The walls were plastered with posters of moody-looking bands I'd never heard of, the air thick with the scent of vanilla perfume and the mysterious musk of adolescence. The clothes on the floor, the tangled charger cables, the stack of books by her bed, it all felt like a deliberate barrier, a landscape designed to keep me out. I'd sit on the very edge of her bed, careful not to disturb the chaos, and the conversations were like delicate, high-stakes diplomatic negotiations between two hostile nations. "How was your day, Lily?" "Fine. Did you have that history test?" "Yeah." "How do you think you did?" "Okay, I guess." "Is there anything you want to talk about? Anything on your mind?" "No. I'm good." I wanted to shake her. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and scream, "I am your mother." "Your mother? Look at me. See me. I am fighting for 100 children every single day, but you are the one I would lay down my life for. You are the one I carried for 9 months. You are the one whose feverish forehead I cooled, whose skinned knees I bandaged, whose nightmares I chased away. Why can't you see that? Why is my love for everyone else a threat to you?" But I didn't. I just sat there, smiling a tired, professional smile, the same placating, patient expression I used with irate parents, and eventually, I'd give up, murmur a hollow "okay, well, I'm here if you need me," and retreat, the click of her door closing behind me feeling like the ceiling of a tomb. David suggested family therapy. More than once. "Clara, we can't go on like this. We need help. A neutral third party. Someone who can help us communicate." I refused, every time. I was the one who solved problems. I was the fixer. I was the one with the answers. The idea of admitting that I, Clara Evans, the woman who could command a classroom of rowdy teenagers and soothe the fears of anxious parents, had no idea how to talk to my own daughter, was unbearable. It felt like the ultimate failure. My professional identity was the last fortress I had, the only place where I was still competent, still in control. To show that kind of vulnerability, to confess that kind of weakness, felt like surrendering the final piece of high ground. So I clung to it more fiercely than ever. I doubled down on my work. I became an even better teacher, if such a thing was possible. I created new, innovative, project-based lesson plans that other teachers from across the state came to observe. I started a peer mentorship program pairing seniors with freshmen. I took on more students for after-school tutoring, more responsibilities on school committees. If I couldn't be a good mother, I would be the best damn teacher this city had ever seen. I would be irreplaceable at school, since I was so clearly dispensable at home. The praise, the professional validation, became my anesthetic. It numbed the pain. The success of my students was a balm I applied, again and again, to the raw, aching, festering wound of my failure as a mother. I told myself that my legacy would be in the hundreds of lives I had touched, the generations of children I had inspired. I tried to convince myself that that was enough. But in the deep, quiet hours of the night, lying awake next to David's peacefully sleeping form, I knew it was a lie. It was a beautiful, noble lie, but a lie nonetheless. But the wound was festering, and infection, eventually, must come to a head. The climax didn't arrive with a bang. It wasn't a screaming match or a slammed door or a shattered plate. It was quieter than that. More intimate. And infinitely more devastating. It was a Thursday. A perfectly ordinary, terrible Thursday. I had stayed late for a district-wide curriculum meeting, a soul-crushing 3-hour affair debating the merits of various standardized test prep modules. I was exhausted, my feet throbbed in my heels, and my head pounded from the fluorescent lights and the circular arguments. I had a stack of essays on the Great Gatsby waiting for me in my bag, a mountain of work that would consume my evening. I walked into the house, my shoulders slumped, braced for the usual silence, the usual retreat. But I heard voices from the living room. David and Lily. They were talking, their tones low and serious. They hadn't heard me come in. I stood in the hallway, just outside the pool of light spilling from the living room, hidden by the shadows. A stranger, an eavesdropper in my own home. Lily was crying. Not the loud, performative sobs of a younger child, but the quiet, hopeless, ragged weeping of someone who has been hurting for a very, very long time and has finally run out of the strength to hold it in. The sound of it made my blood run cold. My body went rigid. I just don't understand why I'm not enough, she whispered, her voice thick and broken with tears. Why are they more important than me? What do they have that I don't? David's voice was low, a steady, soothing rumble. Honey, that's not true. That is absolutely not true. Your mom loves you more than anything in this world. You are her world. Then why does it feel like this? She shot back, the pain sharpening her words into little daggers that found their mark in my heart from across the hall. She knows everything about her students. She knows that Maya is thinking about breaking up with her boyfriend because he's too possessive. She knows that Liam is terrified to tell his dad he wants to be an artist instead of a doctor. She knows who has a crush on who's struggling in math, who's scared to go home after school. She bought Javier a winter coat, Dad. A brand new, warm coat because he was shivering. She doesn't even know that I have hated the brand of yogurt she's been buying me for 6 months. She doesn't know that I'm terrified of my biology teacher, Mr. Henderson, because he yells at kids who get answers wrong and it makes my stomach hurt. She doesn't know that I had my heart broken by Ben Miller at Sarah's party 2 weeks ago. He told me he liked me, and then he spent the whole night dancing with Katie Shields. Everyone saw. Everyone was laughing at me. She wasn't there to notice. She's never there to notice. She just comes home and asks me if my day was fine. Each word was a shard of glass, meticulously aimed, embedding itself deep in my skin, my muscle, my bone. I leaned against the wall, my legs trembling so violently I thought I would collapse. I had bought Javier a coat. I remembered that day clearly. It was a Tuesday. He'd come to school in a thin hoodie, his lips blue with cold. It was an easy fix. A problem I could solve with a credit card and a quick trip to the mall during my lunch break. A tangible, solvable issue. But my own daughter's heartbreak? Her daily, grinding fear of a teacher? The specific brand of yogurt that brought her a moment of joy? Those were nebulous, ongoing, complicated problems. There was no easy, one-time solution. There was no plaque for figuring out the right brand of yogurt. There was no thank you letter for noticing a subtle fear in your child's eyes. It required a constant, patient, daily kind of love, the kind I had been too exhausted, too distracted, too professionally preoccupied to give. She's helping those kids, Lily. It's her calling. It's who she is, David said, but his defense sounded weak, hollow, even to me standing out here in the dark. It was the same defense I had used on myself for years, and hearing it from him, in the face of our daughter's raw pain, exposed its utter bankruptcy. I don't want her calling. Lily cried out, her voice cracking with a passion that was terrifying in its intensity. I want my mom. I miss her. I miss the mom who used to braid my hair and sing off-key to the radio in the car. I miss the mom who would crawl into my bed when I had a nightmare and stay until I fell asleep. Where did she go? Did one of her students take her? Because I want her back. I just want my mom back. She dissolved into deep, racking sobs, the kind that steal your breath, and David held her, murmuring soft, useless comforts, his own voice choked with emotion. I stood in that dark hallway, and the foundation of my entire life, the story I had told myself about who I was and what I stood for, crumbled into dust. The awards, the accolades, the respect, the grateful letters, it all turned to ash in my mouth. It was a beautiful, impressive house, but it was built on sand, and the tide of my daughter's pain had just washed it all away. I had been so busy building a legacy for the city, a monument to Clara Evans, the great teacher, that I had let my own living, breathing legacy, my own child, wither and fade from neglect. I had become a ghost in my own home, a celebrated phantom, praised in absentia while the most important part of my life was happening without me. I didn't go into the living room. I couldn't. What could I possibly say? Any word from me would have been a violation, an intrusion. My presence itself was the problem. I turned around, walked silently out the front door, closing it with a soft click, and sat in my car in the dark driveway. I cried for an hour. I cried for all the bedtimes I'd missed, for the science fairs, for the heartbreaks I hadn't seen, for the yogurt I'd bought wrong for 6 years. I cried for the fear she felt in Mr. Henderson's class that I was too busy to detect. I cried for the little girl who used to wait for me on the kitchen counter, and for the teenager who now waited for me to leave the room. I cried until I was empty, until there were no more tears left, just a dry, hollow ache. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 8 years. My vice principal, Brenda, was shocked. "Clara? My God, are you all right? You never get sick. Is it serious?" "Yes," I said, my voice raspy and raw from a night of weeping. "It's a family emergency." And it was. The most important emergency of my life. I went to the school later, when I knew Lily would be in class. The hallways were quiet, eerie in their emptiness. I went to my classroom. It felt different. Foreign. The inspirational posters, "Reach for the stars. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams," seemed trite, cheap. The truth chair looked like a stage prop. I went to my desk and I opened the bottom drawer. I took out the thick stack of grateful letters from my students, bound together with a rubber band. I held them in my hands. They were precious, they were real, but in that moment, they felt like my shackles. They were the proof that I was a hero to everyone but the one person whose hero I was meant to be. I did something then that I never, in a million years, thought I would do. I took the heavy, brass enwood plaque that read "City's Best Teacher." I carried its weight over to the tall, gray filing cabinet in the corner. I opened the bottom drawer, the one filled with old, outdated textbooks and forgotten curriculum guides. And I placed the plaque inside, face down. I buried it underneath a stack of heavy, dusty literature anthologies. I didn't need to see it anymore. The title felt like the biggest lie I had ever told myself. When Lily came home from school that day, I was waiting for her in the kitchen. I wasn't on my laptop. I wasn't grading papers. My work phone was turned off and tucked away in my purse. I was just sitting at the table, with 2 steaming mugs of chamomile tea and a brand new, unopened container of the yogurt I had just learned, from a frantic trip to 3 different grocery stores, was her favorite. She stopped short when she saw me. Wary. Suspicious. "What are you doing home?" she asked, her backpack slung over one shoulder, ready for a quick escape. "I took the day off," I said. My voice was quiet. There was no teacher ly confidence in it. No professional polish. It was just my voice. Tired. Sad. Real. Just Mom. "Why?" she asked, her guard firmly, understandably, up. I took a deep, shaky breath. This was the hardest thing I would ever do. Harder than any speech, any difficult parent meeting, any school board evaluation. "I heard you last night," I said, my eyes meeting hers, not letting her look away. "Talking to your dad. In the living room." Her face flushed a deep, mortified red. A mixture of shame and defiance flashed in her eyes. She looked like a cornered animal, ready to fight or flee. "I'm sorry," I said. The words were so inadequate, a thimble trying to bail out the ocean. "I'm so sorry, Lily. For everything. For the yogurt. For Mr. Henderson. For Ben Miller. For all of it. For every single moment I made you feel like you were not the most important person in my world." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She didn't speak. "I have no excuse," I continued, my own vision blurring. "None. I got lost. I thought I was building something important, something that would matter, but I was building it in the wrong place. The most important thing I will ever do, the only legacy that will truly matter when I'm gone, is you. Is being your mom. And I have been failing at it. Spectacularly. I pushed the yogurt towards her across the wooden table. I went to 3 different stores to find this brand. The clerk at the third one thought I was crazy. He said, "Lady, it's just yogurt." But it's not. It's your yogurt. A single tear finally escaped and traced a slow, silvery path down her cheek. "And I am resigning as the director of the school play," I said, the decision solidifying as I spoke the words aloud. "I'm stepping down from the peer mentorship program. I am telling Brenda I cannot chair the curriculum committee next year. I am going to learn how to be your mother again. If you'll let me. If it's not too late." She was silent for a long, long time. She just looked at me, her gaze traveling over my face as if she were seeing me for the first time in years. Not Clara Evans, the city's best teacher. Just Clara. Her mom. Stripped of my professional armor, vulnerable, flawed, and finally being honest. "You don't have to quit everything," she whispered finally, her voice so soft I had to lean forward to hear it. "Yes, I do," I said, my voice firm with a new kind of conviction. "For a while, at least. I need to. We need me to. I need to remember what it feels like to have a full tank, so I have something to give to you." She took a tentative step forward. Then another. She slid into the chair across from me and pulled the yogurt towards her. She didn't open it. She just ran her finger over the lid, tracing the logo. "Ben Miller," she began, her voice shaky, hesitant, "he told me he liked me at Sarah's party. He said I had the prettiest eyes he'd ever seen. And then, he spent the whole night dancing with Katie Shields. He didn't even look at me again. Everyone saw. Everyone was whispering. I had to call Dad to come pick me up early." My heart didn't just crack, it shattered. It was such a simple, universal, profound teenage pain. And I hadn't been there to witness it, to hold her while she cried, to tell her that Ben Miller's opinion didn't define her worth, to share in that rite of passage. I had been busy, probably writing a lesson plan or counseling another child through their own heartbreak. "Oh, baby," I said, my own tears falling freely now, no longer trying to hold them back. "Ben Miller is an idiot. A colossal, world-class idiot." A small, watery, genuine smile touched her lips. It was the most beautiful sight I had seen in a decade. "Yeah," she sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "He really is." And we sat there, in the quiet of the afternoon kitchen, the golden hour light slanting through the window, and we talked. We talked for 2 solid hours. We talked about Mr. Henderson and his terrifying yelling, and I promised her, not as a teacher, but as her mother, that I would call the school and talk to the principal about it. We talked about her friends, about the complex social dynamics of the 8th grade that felt like a Shakespearean drama. We talked about the music she liked, and she played me a song from her favorite band, and I didn't criticize it, I just listened. We talked about the book she was reading for English class, and I didn't analyze the symbolism, I just asked her what she thought about the characters. I didn't offer unsolicited advice. I didn't try to teach her anything. I just listened. I was fully, completely, utterly present. For the first time in a very, very long time, I was just her mom. It wasn't a magic fix. A single conversation couldn't erase the years of neglect, the accumulated hurt, the layers of resentment. The road to reconciliation was long, and it was paved with setbacks. There were still stilted conversations, moments of awkwardness, times when the old habits, my reaching for my phone, her automatic retreat, threatened to reassert themselves. But it was a start. It was a new foundation, and this time, I was determined to build it with the right materials, presence, attention, and a love that was no longer a theory but a daily, practiced action. I kept my word. I scaled back. Drastically. It was harder than I thought. I felt a profound sense of loss for my professional self, a gnawing guilt towards my students. The first time I said no to heading a committee, I felt physically ill. But I did it. And every time I came home and saw Lily waiting for me in the kitchen, or watching TV in the living room, and she didn't immediately retreat to her room, the loss felt a little smaller. The guilt began to be replaced by a different feeling, peace. One evening, a few months into this new, fragile normal, I was making dinner, a new recipe she had picked out. Lily was doing her homework at the kitchen table, her biology textbook open to a chapter on cellular respiration. My work phone, which I was trying to keep on silent, buzzed insistently on the counter. An email from a parent, the subject line screaming urgent. Out of old, deep-seated habit, my hand twitched, and I took a half-step towards it. Lily didn't look up from her textbook. "Ignore it, Mom," she said, her voice casual, light, almost sing-song. "It's family time." I stopped. I looked at her. She met my gaze over the top of her book and gave me a small, but utterly genuine, smile. And in that moment, it was better than any standing ovation, any plaque, any glowing newspaper article. It was a thread, reconnecting us. It was a flag of truce. It was a promise of a future. I walked back to the stove, picked up the wooden spoon, and left the phone buzzing on the counter, its urgent demands fading into the background of the sounds of our home, the sizzle of onions in the pan, the scratch of Lily's pencil, the comfortable, healing silence between us. They still call me the best teacher in the city. The plaque is still buried in my filing cabinet, a relic from a different life. I still love my job. I still love my students, and I still give them everything I can during the hours I am paid to be there. But I have finally, truly, learned the lesson I was trying to teach everyone else. The most important legacy you leave isn't in the public record. It isn't in the awards you win or the titles you hold or the articles written about you. It's in the quiet, unremarkable moments in a warm kitchen. It's in knowing the right brand of yogurt. It's in being present for the heartbreaks and fears that seem small and silly to the outside world, but are the entire world to your child. It's in putting down the phone, not because you should, but because you want to. Because what is happening in front of you is more urgent, more real, more important than any crisis on the other side of a screen. My legacy is not in the hundreds of students I helped guide into the world. It is, and always will be, in the one child I almost failed to guide back home to me. And I will spend the rest of my life, not in grand gestures, but in 1,000 small, consistent choices, making sure she never, ever doubts again that she is, and always was, my most important student. My most cherished masterpiece. The one I almost lost, but fought with everything I had to find again. My daughter.